Hello F1 fans! Welcome back to the F1 Masters podcast brought to you by AUBG Daily. As usual, you're with me Vasco, David and Harry, and it has been a roller coaster of a summer break, and we're finally back to discuss the Singapore Grand Prix weekend. And also stay tuned because our summer recap is coming pretty soon to you.
So let's begin with the weekend and the practice sessions, which were pretty uneventful. We saw George Russell crash in FP2, and apart from that, McLaren, especially Lando Norris, was very quick. I also saw a good pace from Charles Leclerc, but that didn't really, realize itself in the qualifying session.
Moving on to qualifying, I can't call these surprises because they're not surprising at this point, but Danny Rick and Lance Stroll were out in Q1, as well as Checo Perez out in Q2. It's like the usual already. We have to mention Nico Hülkenberg's strong qualifying. He was P6. And Ferrari's fumble. They were P9 and P10 at the end. Oscar Piastri's Q2 time was enough for a front row start, but he messed up in Q3, so he started P5. And Lando took pole position and Max Verstappen was P2.
Well, this is the biggest battle that we saw throughout the summer actually between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, this change of scenery, and this just continued in this race. I think we saw a really strong performance from both drivers. Even though Verstappen doesn't have the strongest car anymore, I think he pushes it the best of this car and he tries to get as many points as he can in every race. But let's start with the podium places, as we saw Lando Norris at first, Max Verstappen splitting the two McLarens, as Oscar Piastri was third.
And the DNFs were Alex Albon and Kevin Magnussen. But let's start about the beginning of the race. Lando Norris actually held on to pole position first time in history. So props to him. Overall, the start at the front, pretty much no real changes happened. I mean, we saw some good cars go off the track. We saw Franco Colapinto making the biggest dive bomb since Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, he just went down the inside of 3 cars and made the move stick. And I don't even know, because Alex Albon afterwards complained on the team radio, but I watched the replay and Colapinto wasn't even near Albon, so I was so confused why he complained about it. But what was your guys' thoughts on the start?
Well, I think that Colapinto didn't have any fault in this situation, but Alex Albon was I think he was pissed in general because Colapinto he jumped into the car and he's performing miracles, in my opinion. And I think Alex Albon is not he's feeling the pressure because he has a contract with the team. He's going to drive with Sainz the next season. But this is a training session for him with actually better driver because so far his teammates, let's be honest, they haven't really been at a very high level. We're talking about Nicolas Latifi, we're talking about Logan Sargent, and Colapinto is actually a breath of fresh air to finally see 2 very competitive and adequate drivers in Williams. But I think if this trend continues, Alex Albon is going to feel even more threatened the next season when Sainz jumps into the seat, because we all know all the qualities that Sainz possess.
I agree. Colapinto has been really impressive. He has been up to the task. He has challenged Alex Albon. As you said, finally, he has a teammate who is performing really well and can actually match his levels. And speaking of Alex Albon, his car overheated at lap 25, I think, and he had to retire.
He had a pretty miserable weekend, honestly. It's one of the weakest Alex Albon weekends I've seen in a while. Car overheated, but he had such a bad start that basically any hope of points was over after turn 1.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit disappointed that Franco Colapinto didn't get at least 1 point, as he was 11th at the end of the race, but he performed really great and I think he deserved at least 1 point. But going to Lando Norris, who finally, as you said, made a great start and managed to keep that first place from the beginning till the end. But there was a situation when he nearly hit the wall. It was like, I think, around 10 laps before the end of the race, which if he hit the wall, it would have been like insane, very, very interesting of what is going to happen till the end. But he managed to keep his car, and till the end there were no more problems for him, which opens another topic, in my opinion, which is very interesting, that this has been the first race in Singapore where we didn't see a safety car, and also for a while now we haven't seen safety car, which is a bit strange in my opinion.
I think this is mainly due to the drivers being more cautious, maybe. They don't want to get themselves in incidents. Also, I don't want to sound rude, but there were some incident-prone drivers in the past few years who caused like a lot of safety cars. For example, Logan Sargent, Nicholas Latifi, Nikita Mazepin, you know who I'm speaking about, but I think this is the main reason.
There was a whole title race, one of the best title races that we've seen, that was decided by Nicholas Latifi safety car, so...
Yeah, about Norris, he actually nearly hit the wall twice. And one time he clipped his front wing, and I honestly thought, I reacted the way like Max Verstappen reacted in the cool down room. I thought he actually got damaged. He was unbelievably lucky to not get damaged. And then he also clipped the wall where George Russell crashed last year, and that was very lucky as well that he didn't break suspension. But I think it's just loss of concentration because he was so far in front, and honestly that second stint he drove kind of awful. He like had 30-second lead and he finished the race 20 seconds ahead of Max just because his driving, and when he was lapping cars he was also making mistakes. So Lando, I guess, yeah, I know he obviously dominated the race, but maybe he needs to learn how to keep focused during the whole race.
Yeah, because he's given actually a championship winning car, but it is up to him right now to get the best out of it. And talking about interesting stuff from the race, Charles Leclerc, he made an impressive comeback for what the car can offer him, for all the opportunities that this Ferrari car have, because Ferrari are really strange this season. Sometimes their car is not that bad and they have great performances during the races, but overall it is yet another disappointment for them.
I think that, well, qualifying obviously decided their fate for the race, but they had good pace, and I think that if they had a normal qualifying, they would have been easily in the fight for the podium spots. I think they have the pace actually to fight with McLaren. We've seen that in Monza and Baku, and Charles Leclerc, he had a great strategy actually. Even though he was stuck in traffic early on, the overcut, I guess he had a lot of clean air, managed to gain some time there, and much fresher tires compared to people like Hamilton, who we'll get onto, or George Russell. Even though I know he didn't pass George Russell, which was kudos to George Russell for keeping him behind, but that tire advantage really proved to be beneficial for him. He was lapping like 1.5 seconds faster than like both Mercedes cars, so that was a really good strategy, and he had great pace, honestly.
Talking about Mercedes and problems, what do you think about Lewis Hamilton's strategy? Let's hear it from the Mercedes fan. Harry?
Really disappointing. It was horrible. Mercedes strategies this season have been mostly underwhelming, except for example like George Russell in Belgium, which won him the race, but then he was disqualified, so it didn't count. But I don't know why it seems like that Mercedes strategies are like Ferrari strategies from a few years ago. It's like the same thing all over again. Horrible decisions. At least like at the end of the race, Russell managed to keep Leclerc at bay. He managed to defend really well and won P4, which is nice, but Hamilton was just like, he didn't deserve to get such a strategy. He had more potential in him to get something more probably in the race. I'm not sure he would have been close to Leclerc, but it's just, and the car as well is really like not performing that well in recent races, so I'm kind of disappointed after the strong summer break, especially like Silverstone and Belgium. After that, it just went downhill.
Talking about going downhill, yet another disappointment from Checo Perez, and this is becoming like a constant. Every race, it is hard for him to get to Q3. It is hard for him to even fight against, not against the big four teams. It is hard. It is becoming hard for him to fight against even the midfield teams like Aston Martin and Haas. And we saw in this race, he stayed behind Nico Hülkenberg and Fernando Alonso, and he grabbed only 1 point at the end of the race. It is truly a disappointing season. At every race after the first 5 races, I just don't see it in Checo, and he's not helping the team. And right now you can see, even though Red Bull had the strongest car in the beginning of the season, he wasn't really at the top of his game, and now we can see how this affects the team. As McLaren, we have how many, 6 or 7 races till the end of the season? Six races till the end of the season, and it is looking like almost certain, like 99%, that McLaren are going to take the Constructors' Championship. And I think this is mostly Checo's fault, because he just didn't perform at the needed level throughout the whole season. And Singapore is like another proof of how inconsistent and like not really performing great he has been throughout the whole season.
Even though I think that Checo obviously had a pretty awful race in Singapore, I would not entirely put the blame on him, because we saw overtaking was incredibly difficult, and I think his strategy was pretty bad, because Carlos Sainz, who was actually behind him in the first stint, he did the undercut and he jumped the entire midfield, and Perez didn't do that. The only person he managed to jump was Colapinto, who he was also running behind. And also, this is actually the first time in quite a while that he hadn't reached Q3. I actually thought that he was getting a groove with this and getting more consistent. And it seems like he was starting to feel better with the car, and then he couldn't make it out of Q2. But I would say that this result wasn't entirely on him. I think the strategy also played a part.
Yes, that is true, but that wouldn't have been a problem if he just managed to get to Q3. But again, when it looks like he's improving just a bit, and again, yet another disappointment. And that's what I'm telling you. The whole season is being a repeating story of disappointment, both for Checo and Red Bull. The situation and the relationship between the Mexican driver and the Austrian team is very strange in my opinion, and even though I'm a fan of the team, I'm not really sure what is happening between them. So the next season we will see how the things are going to turn out, but for now I'm on anti-Checo wave.
And we can also comment on the championship battle updates, as Lando Norris closed the gap to Max Verstappen by a further 8 points, or no, seven, because Daniel Ricciardo took the fastest lap at the end of the race. This was like one of the most commented things. So I think the gap right now is...
So the gap right now is 52 points from Verstappen to Norris. In the constructors, McLaren now lead by 41 points over Red Bull. Also, another update, Haas are now only 3 points behind the RB. And just a quick question for you guys. Do you guys think Haas can overtake RB? What do you guys think about that one?
Yeah, I think it's pretty possible, because right now Haas are showing that they have a better car, and Nico Hülkenberg is performing really well recently.
For sure, like Nico Hülkenberg has been on fire, so I think Haas have a pretty good chance. If they take 2 points in the remaining 6 races, they would stay in front of they would be in front of RB.
What if RB get Liam Lawson? Will that make a difference?
I don't really think that this is going to be huge of a difference, mainly because right now I feel like Haas has a bit of an edge compared to RB, and actually Nico Hülkenberg has been performing much, much better than both Ricciardo and Tsunoda. And I just don't think I like Liam Lawson, but I don't think he's like that big of a differential. So he's going to have like a few races that he's going to be like 11th, 12th. Maybe he'll get 1, 2, 3 points, but I don't really think that he's going to like create a new culture at RB and start getting a lot of points and be the lead driver. I think it is just going to be like a training period for him before the start of the next season.
Okay, well, let's move on to our highlights of the weekend, and let's start with Kari.
My highlight is Daniel Ricciardo's probable last race in F1. Like we all know, like it was covered so much in the media after the race. Like he was also really emotional after it because it seems like it's not confirmed yet, but it's going to happen. Like it's inevitable. I don't know why RB just didn't announce it. They're just like waiting. And like the fastest lap was a kind of a goodbye gift, I would say. And like the driver of the day as well. Everybody just seemed to appreciate Danny Rick.
I can say that my highlight of the weekend is the same because Daniel Ricciardo is actually an F1 legend for me personally because he has almost 260 races, a lot of wins, and just the figure that he's that smiling, very cool guy that can race really well, especially during his time in Red Bull. I think he would be remembered as one of the coolest F1 drivers that we have seen. And this was not like really a proper way to say goodbye to him because it is not even the end of the season, but the last lap, like one last time for him in F1, and I think that should be the highlight of the weekend.
Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, it was quite disappointing the way things ended up, and quite a miserable race for him, actually, to be honest, if it is his last ever race. My highlight of the weekend might be simple, straightforward, but Lando Norris, he dominated practice, qualifying, and the race, and he actually was going to be the first ever McLaren driver since Mika Hakkinen to get a Grand Slam before Daniel Ricciardo took that fastest lap. Incredible race by Lando Norris and did the best he could. Unfortunately for him, Max Verstappen finished second, so the points gap only goes down by 7 points. But yeah, he did need a result like this after a few shaky performances. So,
and we can move to the surprise and disappointments of the weekend. Let's start with Harry.
My surprise is George Russell because I was impressed by the way he defended against Charles Leclerc. And my disappointment is Danny Rick because, as David said, a pretty miserable, maybe last race.
My surprise is Max Verstappen, and then I know what you're thinking. Max Verstappen finishing second, that's a surprise? Well, yeah, Max Verstappen, he is driving a car that should arguably be finishing 7th and 8th every race. And what he did in qualifying was really impressive, but what was more impressive is that he pulled away so much from everyone else. Like, obviously, he was miles behind Lando, but he was miles ahead of everyone else. And that is partially due to Mercedes and their questionable strategies. But he was very impressive and took a good amount of points, which is really important for him. And I think the consistency that he is showing, even though he's not winning races anymore, this consistency will win him the title eventually. And my disappointment of the weekend is Alex Albon because he did out-qualify Colapinto by, I think, like 7 thousandths or something. But horrible start, blamed his teammate for no reason, and then was just nowhere and eventually retired. But his race would have been pretty awful anyways.
My surprise of the weekend is called Nico Hülkenberg because being sixth in the qualifying in Singapore, I think is really impressive, especially when you're driving a Haas. And being ninth in the race, taking some points that can help your team overtake your closest rival, in this case RB. I think we saw yet another great performance from Nico Hülkenberg, which highlights his whole season. Like I'm really surprised of how good of a season Nico had so far. And I think you already know what I'm going to say about disappointment. Checo Perez, yet another disappointing weekend, and at this point I'm becoming like the head of the Checo Perez hate club because I just don't think he deserves that seat in Red Bull, but who am I to tell? It is up to Dr. Marco and Christian Horner to decide. Let's move to the predictions for the next race, which is in a month, but it will be interesting what is going to happen in Kota.
So I'll start my two predictions. So the first one, I promise I'm not biased at all, but Ferrari will score the most points. They're actually meant to bring upgrades at Kota, and generally they have good pace, and if they don't mess up qualifying, I think they can achieve this. And my other prediction, Colapinto and the points. I'm on the Colapinto hype train. 3 for 3 on races so far. I think he's not really put a foot wrong on a Sunday, and I think Kota, if Logan Sargent can score points at Kota, Franco Colapinto can score points at Kota. So that's my two predictions.
I actually like the Colapinto prediction a lot because I think it's, as I said, a bit of a fresh air. I really like this guy. My predictions are that Oscar Piastri will win both the sprint and the race. I know it is both, but I really like his driving style, and McLaren are like on cloud 9 right now. So I think they have the potential to do so, and Oscar Piastri if he's given the opportunity, he's going to take it for sure. And my other prediction is that at least one of the Ferraris will be outside of the points, and it is either going to be like some kind of a crash or problem with the car, but I just see it. I just visualize it, like on the 40th lap, Charles Leclerc being like, "Oh no, I have a problem," and we'll hear a lot of crying from David after that race.
Let's hear Harry, yeah.
Well, one of my predictions is actually similar to Vasco, but it's just that the driver is like different. I said that Norris will win both the sprint and the race because I also believe in McLaren's pace right now. And I think that he will outperform Piastri. I don't know if it's going to happen, but at least that's my prediction. And my other prediction is connected to the Danny Ric exit. And I think that Liam Lawson will come in RB and he will score points in his first race, even though, like you already said, he will not be like the decisive factor in the battle with Haas. I think that he may contribute to RB's points tally.
Usually Kota doesn't disappoint, so if all of the things happens at once, not like Norris to win both the sprint and the race and Lawson to get some points, it is going to be yet another interesting race. But I think that we can come to the end. This is all for today from us, guys. We're looking forward to the next episode. You can expect a recap of all of the races so far, as I said, pretty soon. Till then, like, subscribe, and follow us and AUBG Daily on Instagram and Facebook, and stay tuned for more of our content. Thank you, and remember,
if you no longer go for a gap that exists,
you're no longer a racing driver.